So for this video, we're going to talk about what it means to evaluate an algebraic expression. And remember from the previous video, an algebraic expression is a combination of variables, constants, and operations. Or another way to think of an algebraic expression is it's just the sum or difference of terms, okay? So evaluating an algebraic expression, it means that we're looking at the process of replacing the variables with given values and then using the order of operations to simplify. So we're taking those variables. Remember, variables are placeholders for unknown values, and we're going to insert a value for that. And then we use the order of operations to simplify. So in case you forgot the steps to the order of operations, here they are. So the order of operations, remember, it's just a way to make sure we're all getting the same answer because we're all following the same operations in the same order, okay? So the first thing you want to look for is to perform all operations inside grouping symbols. So grouping symbols are like parentheses or brackets or braces that if you look inside, there's some operation that needs to be performed. So if you look inside those parentheses, there's some addition or subtraction or multiplication or something inside. Next up, we would look at exponents. So we'd want to simplify all expressions that contain exponents. You could also throw in square roots here. The third step is to multiply and divide. And we multiply and divide in the same step. We just work from left to right. And then finally, we add or subtract, again, in the same step. We just work from left to right. So a lot of students might remember PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So the P in PEMDAS just stood for parentheses, but remember we can extend that to grouping symbols, so brackets, braces, parentheses, what have you. The E stood for exponents, and remember you can throw in square roots here too if you'd like. The MD stood for multiplication and division, so that's like a little slash. And just remember multiplication and division from left to right. And then finally, we have addition and subtraction. And just like with multiplication and division, we do these in the same step, working from left to right. Okay? So let's look at a few examples, all right? So example 2 says, evaluate each expression for the given values. So looking at part A, we have x squared minus 3x plus 4, and we want to evaluate for when x is negative 3. So the variable x is some placeholder, and in this particular example, it's a placeholder for the number negative 3. So anywhere I see an x, I'm going to replace it with a negative 3 using parentheses. So I've got negative 3 squared, which is just x squared, minus 3 times x, where x is negative 3. Don't forget your plus 4. Now, I do want to kind of caution you here. The parentheses you're seeing right here are not grouping symbols. These parentheses are just keeping a negative with a 3. Okay, they're keeping that negative with the 3. They're also indicating just multiplication. These are not grouping symbol parentheses. Grouping symbols would have some other operation happening inside. These are just keeping a negative with a number, okay? So now the first step to the order of operations that we actually need to apply would be step 2, which is exponents. We certainly have an exponent here. Now remember, if you have a negative base, negative 3 being our base, and it's inside parentheses, the exponent determines whether this is going to be a positive or a negative product. So if you have an even exponent, you're going to have a positive product. If you have an odd exponent, you're going to have a negative product. We have an even exponent, so this is going to be a positive. So we could really just treat this as 3 times 3, which is positive 9. So write down your positive 9 and then bring down the rest of the problem. Okay? So the next step that we need to apply from the order of operations would be to multiply or divide. So if I look at this middle part of this expression, I have minus 3 times negative 3. Well, I'm going to treat that minus 3 like a negative. So minus 3 is going to be negative 3. I'm multiplying that by another negative 3. So when you multiply two negatives, it just becomes positive. So negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So I'm going to write that as plus 9. So I've got 9 plus 9. And don't forget the 4. And now we're just doing that last step where we add or subtract, and we want to work from left to right. So 9 plus 9 is 18. 18 plus 4 is 22. So if we were to evaluate x squared minus 3x plus 4 for negative 3, we get 22. All right. Now looking at example B, we have negative 5x minus 3y divided by 3 times xy. Here, we're going to replace all of our x's with 2. We're going to replace all of our y's with -5. So the first thing I want to do is just rewrite this expression, replacing the x's and the y's with the given values. So my numerator becomes -5 times x, which is 2, minus 3 times y, which is -5. The denominator becomes 3 times x, which is 2, times y, which is -5. Now, what I want to do here is simplify the numerator, simplify the denominator, and then at the very end, we'll do any division or simplifying that we can. So looking at the numerator, I have addition and subtraction. So I have subtraction, but I also have multiplication. So we're going to do the multiplication first because it comes first in our order of operations. So I have, excuse me, -5 times +2. When you multiply two negatives, if you multiply two numbers and one is negative and the other is positive, you get a negative product. So we get -10. And then I have -3 times -5. I'm going to treat that -3 like -3. So -3 times -5 is going to become +15. When you multiply two negatives, it becomes positive. So we get +15. And then for the denominator, I'm multiplying three numbers. Of those three numbers, only one is negative. So that's going to make the whole product in the denominator negative. So let's just multiply across and remember that it's negative. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. And remember, we only had the one negative, so the denominator is now -30. Okay? So looking at the numerator, I still have some addition that I need to take care of. So when you're adding two numbers that have different signs, you actually subtract and keep the sign of whatever the larger number was. Okay? So 15 minus 10 is 5. That's easy. But then I have to look at the -10 and the +15. Did I have more negative or did I have more positive? Well, because I have more positive, as in 15 is bigger than 10 and 15 is positive, my final answer in the numerator is going to become positive. So remember, 15 minus 10 is 5, and it's going to remain positive. And then my denominator is still negative. And at this point, we have a fraction. We're not going to get a nice, pretty integer value. We will get a fraction as the final answer, but we do need to reduce it. So if I look at 5 and 30, they're both divisible by 5. So I want to divide 5 and -30 by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. -30 divided by 5 is -6. So the final answer here is -1/6. Okay? And then finally for part C is very similar to part A. We're going to take 2x squared minus 5x plus 3, and we're going to evaluate for when x is -2. So rewrite the problem. So I get 2 times x squared, but remember, x is -2. Minus 5 times x, but remember, x is -2. And then plus 3. So again, in this particular case, the parentheses you're seeing are not grouping symbols. They're just keeping a negative with a number. They indicate multiplication, really. So the first step that we need to follow is to deal with this exponent. So I've got -2 as my base with an exponent of 2. So the exponent's even. It's going to make for a positive product. So 2 times 2 is 4. So 2 to the second power is 4. So I keep the original 2, all right? And then 2 squared is 4. And then I've got -5 times -2 plus 3. Okay? So now we've got addition and subtraction. We also have multiplication. We have to take care of multiplication first. So first up, we have 2 times 4. We're multiplying two positive numbers, so the product's going to be positive, so we just get 8. Next, we have -5 times -2. I'm going to treat that -5 that you see as a -5. So instead of thinking -5, think -5. So -5 times -2, we're multiplying two negatives. That becomes positive. So I'm going to get plus 10. It becomes positive 10, so just write it plus 10. And then don't forget your plus 3. So then we we add from left to right. We're in that final step, addition or subtraction. We have addition. We're going to go left to right. So 8 plus 10 is 18. And then 18 plus 3 is 21. So if we evaluate 2x squared minus 5x plus 3 for x is -2, we would get 21. All right.